Chapter 1. The Papers That Bore My Name. They called me a bad mother, said I was too emotional to raise my own child. They recorded my tears, forged my son's words, and called it proof. But when the truth played in that courtroom, my 12-year-old stood up and said the only thing they couldn't twist with Mom, because she never lied to me. My name is Emma, and this is the story of how my son and I turned their lies into evidence. Rain has a way of making everything quieter, like the world holds its breath before something breaks. That afternoon in Portland, I sat at my kitchen table listening to the soft tapping against the window, while the envelope lay unopened beside my cup of tea. I knew the letterhead before I saw it: Callaway and Pierce Attorneys at Law, Ryan's firm, my name printed neatly above the words "Petition for Sole Custody." My hands didn't shake when I opened it, maybe because part of me had been waiting. The words blurred for a moment, not from surprise, but from recognition. Unstable, unfit, emotionally erratic. Those were Ryan's favorite descriptions when he needed to sound professional about destroying me. We'd met in 2010, back when I still believed people told the truth when they said forever. I was 21, teaching art part-time at a community center. He was already ambitious, 23, and certain the world owed him a stage. We married a year later in a courthouse downtown with 2 witnesses and a borrowed bouquet. For a while, I thought we were happy. Then came Noah in 2011, the sleepless nights, the postpartum fog, and Ryan's new job at a financial law firm that devoured every hour of his life. By 2016, the marriage collapsed quietly, like a bridge eroding underneath its own weight. He called it my fault. Said I was too emotional, that my tears made him feel trapped. When I found the text messages to a paralegal named Jenna, he told me it was just a distraction and accused me of spying. The divorce papers arrived 2 weeks later. The judge back then granted joint custody, but everyone knew what that meant. Noah lived mostly with me in our small rented duplex near Alberta Street, and Ryan appeared on alternate weekends with expensive toys and a photographer's smile. For years, I built a life around normalcy. Teaching full-time at Roosevelt High, painting with Noah on weekends, attending parent-teacher nights alone. Until this letter. Until his ambition found a new stage. The rain thickened outside as I flipped through the petition. Ryan's signature slanted confidently at the bottom, as if he'd already won. Attached was a declaration from his lawyer, complete with an accusation that I was emotionally unfit to provide a stable environment. They even mentioned an incident recorded last fall. I scrolled through my email heart steady until I found the attachment. A video. I pressed play and saw myself sitting in my car parked outside the school after parent conferences. My head was down, my hands gripping the steering wheel as tears fell silently. I remembered that day. I had just learned a student of mine, a shy girl named Amelia, had dropped out because of her parents' divorce. The memory had hit too close. I cried for 5 minutes, then drove home. That was all. Now those 5 minutes were his proof. I stared at the timestamp. The camera angle was slightly off-center, recorded from the dashboard. Ryan had installed a dash cam months ago for safety when he borrowed the car to take Noah on a trip to Mount Hood. I hadn't thought twice about it. I should have. My phone buzzed, a message from the school's office manager. "Hi, Emma, could you stop by tomorrow? There's been a concern raised by a parent. It's about Noah." I already knew what it was. Ryan was efficient. When he attacked, he did it from every direction. That night, Noah was sprawled on the couch, his legs tangled in a blanket, laughing at a cartoon, his curls stuck to his forehead, his eyes bright. He was 12 now, almost my height, with the same quiet focus I'd once loved in Ryan before it hardened into calculation. "Mom, did you see my art project?" he asked. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Bring it here." He handed me a poster board covered in pencil sketches of our kitchen. "It's called Mom's Kitchen. Ms. Adams said we had to draw our favorite place." I traced the outline of the chipped coffee mug on the counter, the tiny detail he'd captured so perfectly. "It's beautiful," I said, my voice steady. He grinned. "Dad said he might take me skiing next weekend." "Is that okay?" "Of course." I tucked a curl behind his ear. "Just remember your gloves this time." He laughed and ran to his room. I watched the doorway long after he disappeared, listening to the rain. The next morning, the principal called me into her office. Her tone was careful, the way people talk when they think they might be stepping into someone else's tragedy. "Emma." "I just wanted to check in," she said, folding her hands. "A parent reached out expressing concern about your emotional state." Something about a video online. My stomach sank. Online. She hesitated. Apparently, it was sent privately to a few parents. I want you to know the staff here respects you deeply. We're required to follow up, that's all. I thanked her, left the office, and drove home through the drizzle. The city blurred past in muted grays. By late afternoon, I was sitting across from a man I'd found through a referral, Daniel Reese, family law attorney, mid-40s, calm eyes, no pretense. His office smelled of cedar and coffee. He read through the petition, silently flipping each page like it weighed nothing. Finally, he looked up. He's building a case on emotional instability and financial inadequacy. Classic strategy. He's always known how to sound reasonable while doing something cruel, I said. Daniel leaned back. We'll gather our own evidence. School records, testimony from colleagues, Noah's attendance and grades. Everything that proves stability. But there's something else. He tapped the file. This video. How did he get it? I think he installed a dash cam in my car without removing it. He nodded slowly. That's unlawful surveillance in Oregon, especially if he used it without consent. We'll document it. Don't confront him yet. I folded my hands. He's already ahead, isn't he? Daniel gave a faint smile. He's loud. You'll win by being precise. We don't fight noise with noise. That night, I cleared the kitchen table and began a new journal. I wrote everything. Dates, messages, every call. I scanned the court letter, the school's email, even the timestamp from that video. For years, I'd painted with watercolors because I loved how the image slowly took shape, how clarity appeared from chaos. This felt the same. Stroke by stroke, I was rebuilding the story he tried to distort. At midnight, I walked into Noah's room. He was asleep, curled on his side, one hand clutching his sketch pad. The faint hum of rain filled the silence. His drawing of our kitchen sat on the nightstand edges, curling slightly. I sat beside him, careful not to wake him, and whispered words he would never need to remember. I won't let him take you. Outside, a siren wailed and faded into the distance. I looked around the dim room, the walls covered with his doodles, the small shelf of paints we shared on weekends. Everything that mattered fit into this quiet space. On the table in the living room, the legal envelope still lay open, the words bold and final. Petition for sole custody. I turned off the light, leaving it there under the soft hum of the refrigerator like a threat waiting to be answered. I didn't cry again, not that night. Instead, I wrote another note in my journal. Evidence of camera installation. Contact IT specialist tomorrow. Begin timeline of events. The clock read 2:03 a.m. when I finally stopped. I stood by the window watching the reflection of the streetlights in the puddles below and felt something shift inside me. Not fear, not anger, just resolve. Ryan always thought tears were weakness. He never understood that sometimes they're preparation. When I finally lay down, the house was still except for Noah's quiet breathing down the hall. I closed my eyes and let the rain fill the silence. The sound was steady, relentless cleansing. Tomorrow I would start turning his noise into proof. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 2. The Words That Cut Deep. The morning came slow and gray, the kind of Portland morning that makes you move carefully so you do not disturb the fog. I packed Noah's lunch, set his sketch pad in his backpack, and wrote a note on a sticky tab that said, I will pick you up at 3. He nodded like a small soldier accepting orders and slipped out the door to catch the bus. I watched from the window until he turned the corner. Then I took the legal folder, the journal I had started, and drove downtown to the courthouse on Southwest 4th. Multnomah County Circuit Court has the sort of hallways that swallow footsteps. I checked in at Family Division and sat on a wooden bench near a potted plant that had given up months ago. Daniel arrived with his case file under one arm, the collar of his navy coat damp from the drizzle. He took the seat beside me and spoke in a low voice that steadied the air between us. We will keep this focused. If he tries to inflame, we answer with process. Remember to breathe. I said I am ready. He studied my face like a doctor measuring pulse. Then he nodded and stood when the clerk called our case. When we entered the courtroom, Ryan was already there with his lawyer and his mother. He had chosen the sharp, dark suit that makes him look like the answer key to every test. Samantha Green sat to his right, early 30s, precise posture, hair pinned back like a decision. Lorraine Whitman sat behind them with her purse clutched in both hands. She scanned me the way a teacher scans for mistakes on a board. The judge took the bench and called our names. The room lost its small talk. When Ryan rose for his opening, I could feel the old choreography return to him. Voice at medium volume phrases shaped to sound like care. He said that Noah is afraid of his mother. He said Noah wrote that she screams and cries at night. He said stability is a right, not a reward. Daniel leaned close and whispered, "He is seeding fear. Do not react." I looked down at my hands. They were still. Ryan's lawyer asked to submit an exhibit. The clerk handed up a notebook page inside a plastic sleeve. The judge read silently, her brows drawing together. Then she read portions aloud in a flat voice that removed the theater from the words. The page described a mother who threw dishes, who slept all afternoon, who forgot to make dinner, who made her child feel unsafe. I kept my eyes on the paper. The letters were tall and slanted loops, heavy at the top with a strange leftward lean on the capital M. Noah writes with small, even strokes and a neat rightward slant. He loves to box each date on the top line like a tiny calendar. This page had no date box. This page carried a hand that wanted to be believed more than it wanted to be true. Daniel stood. "Your Honor, we object to admission for weight and request that any temporary consideration be conditioned on forensic handwriting analysis. We also request an independent psychological evaluation of the minor by a neutral expert, Dr. Marianne Fields, who has no prior relationship with either party and is available for timely assessment." Ryan faced the bench and said that this is a delay tactic. He said that my supposed instability is ongoing and that Noah deserves immediate relief. The judge looked from one table to the other, then back at the page. She asked Daniel why he believed the writing is not the child's. Daniel said patterns of formation, inconsistent slant, and lack of contextual markers, but more importantly, the best interest of the minor requires clarity rather than haste. He spoke without heat, like he was reading a weather report. The judge tapped her pen once. Handwriting analysis is granted. Independent evaluation is granted. The notebook page will be marked for identification only until the court receives the results. She turned to Ryan's counsel. "Given the gravity of the allegation, the court will proceed with caution." For a moment, the hum of recycled air was the only sound. Then the tension broke like glass sliding in a frame. Ryan's jaw tightened. He leaned toward Samantha and spoke in a whisper that was not quite quiet. "Push harder. Do not let her control the tempo." Samantha nodded, but her eyes flicked to me and then to the judge with a shadow of thought that looked very much like doubt. Daniel squeezed my elbow lightly, a pressure that meant we had a foothold. The judge moved the hearing along to scheduling and guidelines for the evaluation. We traded dates, promised compliance, and agreed to keep Noah insulated from adult conversation as much as possible. The last part felt like a sentence written on paper the court could hold while the child carried the weight of the real thing. When we stepped into the corridor, the murmur of other families swept around us. Lorraine was waiting near the door, like weather waiting at a state line. She moved in front of me with more speed than I expected, and spoke softly so it would hurt more. "You have made my grandson suffer. A decent mother would put his comfort first and end this." I let the words pass through me like wind through an open room. Daniel took a small step forward, but I lifted a hand. I said I believe Noah knows who loves him without conditions. Lorraine's mouth tightened. "You always had a way of making trouble sound like virtue." She turned away before I could answer, which was probably the only kind thing she did all day. Daniel checked his watch, and then his notes. "I want to brief you on next steps," he said. "There is a lab we use for handwriting analysis in town. Turnaround can be quick. Dr. Fields can meet with Noah within 2 weeks." He looked at me to measure whether that would feel like an eternity. I said, "Bring her in sooner if you can." He said, "I will ask." Outside the courthouse, the rain had softened to a mist that made the city look like a charcoal sketch. I drove to Roosevelt for my afternoon classes. On the way, I replayed the corridor scene in my head, then forced myself to stop. I have learned that repetition is a false control. You do not change the past by fixing it in memory. In the late afternoon, I sat with the art club while the students shaded fruit bowls that looked like moons. One of them, a girl named Nia, asked if I was okay. I said, "I am fine," and told her to lighten the left edge of the pear. When the last bell rang, I cleaned brushes slowly until the room felt quiet enough to leave. At home, Noah let himself in with a burst of wet sneakers and news. Ms. Adams said my kitchen drawing looks like a photograph. Can I add color before the due date? I told him yes and pulled out the tin of colored pencils we keep for rainy days. He worked at the table while I made pasta and listened to the soft scratch of his pencil-billed light on paper. After dinner, he asked if Dad would still take him skiing. I said that is between you and Dad, but we will make sure you are safe and warm. He said okay, with a small voice that told me he already knew safety had nothing to do with coats. When he went to shower, my phone buzzed with an email from Daniel. Subject line read, Evaluator confirmed. Body read, Dr. Marianne Fields can see Noah this Friday at 3. Please confirm availability and I will send the standard parent instructions. PS Lab can accept samples tomorrow morning. Will coordinate chain of custody. I wrote back, yes, and thank you. Then set a reminder to gather sample pages of Noah's schoolwork with dates. I could already picture the curve of his lowercase g and the way he dots his I slightly to the right. It felt obscene to feed my child's handwriting to a system that needed proof to recognize him, but proof was the language of this place. I would speak it fluently. Friday came with the smell of wet wool and printer ink. We arrived at Dr. Field's office 10 minutes early. The waiting room was painted a calm shade of green and had a bin of wooden blocks that had lost their corners to other children's anxieties. Noah sat beside me with his sketch pad on his lap. He drew the outline of a window with rain outside and a small figure inside wearing a crown made of erasers. Dr. Fields opened the door and greeted us with the soft authority of someone who knows children live in trains of thought, not stations. She asked to speak with Noah first and told me the session would be an hour. She handed me a sheet that explained the process in plain language. It said that she would listen, that children are not asked to choose sides, that emotional safety is the priority. It said other things that were true and not nearly enough. I paced a rectangle into the carpet until the door opened. Noah came out with his shoulders lower than before, a good sign. He said, "Can we get hot chocolate?" Dr. Field said, "I will meet with you next, Ms. Calloway, for a brief parent consult." Noah nodded and walked to the small table near the window to keep drawing while we talked. Inside her office, she took notes while I told her about the video, the petition, and the notebook page. I kept it to facts. She thanked me for the clarity. Then she said something I carried with me for days. Noah did not say he is afraid of you. What he did say is that he feels pushed to narrate his world in ways that do not match his feelings. She added that she could not testify yet, and that everything would go through proper channels. Even so, the sentence sat in my chest like a warm stone. On the way out, Samantha was in the hallway. I had not expected to see her there. She gave a tight smile that belonged to the part of her life where everything has a rule. I said hello. She said hello and then looked at Noah. Her face shifted half a degree the way a compass flickers when it remembers north. She said, "I trust the court will do what is best for him." It was a sentence that carried more than its weight. That afternoon, Daniel called with an update. The judge signed the order for the analysis. The lab had received samples. Timelines were set. He also said a notice had gone out reminding both parties to keep Noah away from litigation talk. His voice was careful on that last part. A reminder can be a warning. That evening, I took Noah to Powell's and let him pick a book he had wanted for months. He chose a thick fantasy with a map at the front and names that sound like water. In the cafe, he drank hot chocolate while I read the first page aloud in a whisper. He leaned into my arm, and for a moment the world folded into the small square of table we were sharing. On the drive home, he said something that thinned the air. Dad told me writing down sad stuff helps doctors understand. Like if I write it enough, it becomes true enough to fix. I kept my hands steady on the wheel. I said doctors help by listening to feelings that already exist. I said you do not have to write a story that hurts you just to make someone else feel better. He was silent for a while. Then he said, "I like drawing kitchens better." Back at the duplex, I tucked the book into his backpack with the sticky note that still said, "I will pick you up at 3." When he went to brush his teeth, I sat at the table and updated the journal. Court granted handwriting analysis. Court granted independent evaluation. Samantha's hesitation observed during whisper from Ryan. Lorraine confrontation recorded in memory only. No response necessary. The doorbell rang once and my heart tripped because surprise is rarely good in a custody fight. I opened the door to find Lorraine on the porch, her umbrella dripping a small lake onto the mat. She looked past me into the living room as if she had a right. I stepped into the doorway so she could not. She spoke in a voice that tried to be gentle and failed. Noah needs stability. He needs structure. Ryan provides that. You provide art. You always did love a mess and call it a masterpiece. She lifted her chin. A judge can see what is real. I said every child needs a home where he can tell the truth without choosing which adult to keep. She let out a short breath that was almost a laugh. Then she said, "You always have an answer." She turned and walked down the steps into the rain. I watched her go without moving. When I shut the door, my hands were steady again. That night, I emailed Daniel a short summary of the day. He replied that the next hearing would be set once the lab and Dr. Field submitted reports. He added a line that I read twice. Judges notice who manages conflict and who produces it. I lay awake listening to the rain filigree the roof. In the next room, Noah's breathing rose and fell in a rhythm that felt like the only law that mattered. I thought of the notebook page in its plastic sleeve, the loops that did not belong to my child, and the voice in court that insisted they did. I thought of Samantha's eyes when she looked at Noah. That half degree, that small north. In the morning, we would go on with ordinary things. He would pack his sketch pad, and I would pack the folder for Daniel. There would be bus stops and copy machines and students asking for new brushes, but the ordinary had a new spine now. The court had given me 2 engines that run on time and paper, analysis and evaluation. The words sounded clinical and distant, yet they were doors, and someone had just handed me the keys. I turned off the kitchen light, and the room fell into the soft blue of late evening. Noah's drawing of our kitchen sat on the table, a thin band of yellow pencil catching the last bit of light. I stood there for another minute, then put the drawing back in his folder and closed it carefully so the edges would not curl. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 3. The sounds no one was supposed to hear. Morning light came in thin and pale, the kind that makes dust look like snow. I brewed coffee and stood over the sink while the machine hissed. The house was quiet except for Noah turning pages in his room. When he padded into the kitchen in his socks and dropped his backpack by the chair, I felt the familiar tug to keep everything ordinary. I buttered toast he asked for strawberry jam, and we pretended that the world was just school pencils and the bus that was always 2 minutes late. After he left, I called the number Daniel had texted me for a technology investigator. A man answered on the second ring with a voice that sounded like he measured twice before cutting anything. He said his name was Liam Torres and that he could stop by around noon. I told him I would be home and that I needed help checking for any devices in my car or apartment. He said to leave things as they were so he could document placement. I cleaned without moving the things that mattered. I folded a blanket, I rinsed 2 mugs. I left the plastic bin of toys by the bookshelf where Noah always kept it, the green dinosaur on top with one eye rubbed pale from years of small fingers. Liam arrived exactly when he said he would, tall and unhurried with a canvas bag and a clipboard. He showed me a form and asked permission to inspect the car and the residence. I signed and wrote the date carefully, April 2023, as if ink could hold the day in place. He started with the car. He opened the glove box, checked the mirror, and followed the edges of the dashboard with a small flashlight until he found the mount where a camera had been. He took photos, measured the adhesive shape, and bagged a tiny fragment of plastic as if it were a fossil. Back inside, he walked the rooms in a slow square, scanning vents and outlets, but pausing longest near the shelf where Noah kept his toys. He crouched, lifted the dinosaur, then set it down gently and looked at me. "May I power this toy on in your presence?" he said. "Yes," I said, but my throat went dry. He removed the belly plate with a coin from his pocket and studied the battery compartment. Then he slid a fingernail under a small disc that had been tucked beside the batteries and held up something no larger than a shirt button. "It is a micro recorder," he said. "It stores locally and can be configured to send data. I will need to check." My knees asked for a chair, so I sat. He connected the piece to a reader and opened a laptop. He typed for a minute with the calm of someone changing a tire in the rain. Then he turned the screen slightly so I could read without touching it. A configuration page showed a contact email. It was a work address with Ryan's surname and his firm's domain set as the destination for automatic summaries. Below it, a list of timestamps scrolled like a quiet accusation. My hands reached for the dinosaur without my consent. I held it close and for a second forgot to breathe. Heat rose in my face and then cooled so fast I thought I might faint. He put this in my son's toy, I said, and the room echoed for a moment. Liam spoke softly. We will document everything before we move it. I need to photograph the toy and the compartment. Then I will seal the device in an evidence bag with the time and date. You will sign the inside sticker, and I will sign the outside. That creates the initial link for chain of custody. I nodded and wiped my face with the heel of my hand. Tears made everything look like glass. He took the photographs, printed 2 copies of the receipt, and sealed the recorder in a clear bag. He wrote the location of discovery, the make of the toy, and the serial number of the recorder. Then he had me sign the small white block on the edge of the seal. He signed next to mine in narrower letters. He handed me 1 copy and tucked the other into his clipboard. What happens next? I asked. I will produce a report that includes the steps I took and screenshots of the configuration. Your attorney can use that to request a protective order and to support a motion in limine if he seeks to admit any associated audio. You should also preserve a copy of any recordings you intend to offer. I can assist with extraction. He looked toward the door as if hearing the shape of a car on wet pavement. Do not discuss this with the other parent. Let your attorney handle contact. I thanked him, then thanked him again, because the first thank you had been too small to carry what I felt. Daniel will want to speak with you, I said. Can I have him call this afternoon? I will keep my phone near me, he said. After he left, I sat at the table and stared at the green dinosaur in the evidence photo. I could see the white edge where the paint had worn away. I wondered how long it had been listening. I wondered what it had heard. Noah laughing about a math joke. Noah asking for a second bowl of cereal. Noah humming while he drew night skies with a black-colored pencil and a rubber eraser for stars. I called Daniel and told him what Liam had found. He was silent for a breath, then spoke in the same measured way he used in court. We are going to do 3 things, he said. First, we will file a motion in limine that covers any recordings from your home and from devices placed without consent. Second, we will ask for a protective order that prohibits further surveillance and contact that manipulates the child's statements. Third, Liam will deliver the device with his report to our office so we can mirror the data and maintain chain of custody. I said I could drop off the printed screenshots and the receipt. Good, he said. And Emma, do not tell Noah yet about what we found. Children deserve the truth, but they also deserve not to carry the adult version of it. We will move quickly, I promised, and hung up. The apartment felt newly crowded with silence. I cleaned the counter and put the evidence copy in a folder with a spine that did not bend. The clock said 2:40 when I grabbed my umbrella and headed to the school. At the pickup line, Noah climbed in backpack heavier than usual. Ms. Adams said my drawing might go on the classboard, he said. She asked if I wanted to add the steam from the pasta pot. I think I can do that with white pencil. I know you can, I said. He watched my face for a second. Did you have a good day? I heard the caution in his voice and made my own voice soft. I did important things, I said, and I am glad you are with me. That evening, I texted Kelly Haynes, a friend from my old department who now worked part-time near Ryan's firm. She had offered weeks ago to help if I needed a contact. I told her I was trying to verify whether Ryan had sent any internal messages about the case that would suggest a strategy to provoke me. She wrote back 2 words and a question mark. What scope? I typed carefully. Anything that pressures staff to make me cry in court. Anything about drafting fake materials. Anything that mentions a notebook. She sent a thumbs up and said she would ask someone she trusted in admin to look at the general communications channel. She added that if there was anything, she would not send it to me directly. She would send it to Daniel. I thanked her. I knew what it cost to help someone against a man who wears power like a tailored jacket. After dinner, Noah set his sketchpad on the table. The green dinosaur sat on the shelf looking ordinary. I felt a wave of anger that tasted like metal, then let it pass. I asked the question that had sat too long in my chest. Does the notebook at Dad's house belong to you? I said. He froze for a second, then kept his eyes on the page. No, he said. Did you write anything in a notebook about me? I said. His pencil stopped. He swallowed. Dad said writing down sad stuff helps doctors, he whispered. He said if I write it enough, it will become clear, and then I will feel better. He said if I tell the judge a clear story, it will help them fix things faster. I kept my hands flat on the table. What did you tell him? I said. That I do not like when you cry, he said. But you do not scare me. I told him I liked drawing kitchens better than writing sad stories. He got quiet. Then he said I need to say the words anyway so people can understand. His mouth trembled and he bit his lip like he was trying to put the feeling back where it came from. You do not have to write anything that hurts you, I said. You do not have to make a story true to make someone else comfortable. He nodded and pressed the pencil too hard, breaking the tip. I can fix that, I said, and sharpened it with the small blue sharpener he loves because it makes little curls like ribbon. He worked for a while and then went to brush his teeth. When he came back, he stood in the doorway holding his phone like it weighed more than it should. Can I call Dad? He said. I hesitated, then said yes, and I stayed in the kitchen while he went to his room. The door was partly open. I was not listening for words. I was listening for tone, the way a mother listens for thunder to know how far away the storm is. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then the kind of quiet that pulls you out of a chair. Noah came back to the kitchen with the phone pressed to his chest. I am going to send you something, he said, and his voice had that careful calm that pains you because it belongs on an adult. What is it? I said. Just in case, he said. He set the phone on the table and walked to his room. A minute later, a notification bloomed on my screen. He had sent an audio file with the timestamp from his call. My hands hovered above the glass, and then I pressed play. Ryan's voice filled the kitchen like cold air. You need to make this simple for the judge, buddy. You need to say the words. You can say you feel scared at night. You can say she cries and yells. You can say you do not sleep well. Use short sentences. Noah's voice was small but even. I do not feel scared of Mom, he said. I sleep fine. You are not listening, Ryan said. This is about clarity. If you say you are fine, they will not fix anything. Do you want to live in a place with more space, with a real yard? Do you want to travel? Judges listen to simple stories. There was a pause that tasted like iron. Will you be mad at me if I do not say it? Noah whispered. I will be disappointed, Ryan answered. And I will tell the court you refuse to cooperate. You do not want that. It will make you look like you are afraid to tell the truth. The file crackled, then ended. I realized I had been holding my breath. I set the phone down and stared at the table until the wood grain became a road. Noah stood in the doorway again. His eyes were wide and steady. I did not tell him I was recording, he said. I know I should not record people without asking. But Ms. Adams said if you feel like you might forget what was said, you can write it down. I cannot write that fast. So I used my phone. I can delete it if you want. I shook my head and found my voice. You did the right thing, I said. In Oregon, you can record a conversation you are part of without asking. That is called one-party consent. I am glad you trusted yourself. He looked at me like he was checking to see if I meant every word. Can we have cereal now? He asked, because childhood is a place that keeps making room for normal. Yes, I said, and poured a small bowl even though it was late. After he went to bed, I forwarded the file to Daniel with a short message. Audio from call between father and child during which father instructs child to use pre-written statements. Recorded by child. Time and date attached. He replied within 10 minutes. Received. I will mirror immediately. Tomorrow we will move for a protective order and attach a declaration explaining the circumstances. Keep the original on your device and do not send it to anyone else. Thank you for trusting me with this. I set the phone on the table and put both hands flat on the wood the way you steady yourself on a dock before stepping into a boat. The apartment was quiet except for the fridge clicking on and the rain beginning again. I thought of the recorder in the evidence bag and the email address on Liam's screen. I thought of Ryan's voice telling our son to make simple sentences out of pain that did not exist. Near 9:30, my phone buzzed with a new email. It was from Daniel. No subject line, just an attachment and 2 sentences. From a source. Internal message sent to associate counsel from opposing party. We will authenticate. I opened the PDF. A short email appeared with Ryan's signature block at the bottom. The line that mattered sat in the middle like a nail. Push harder. Make her cry in court. Emotional custody is momentum. I forwarded nothing. I saved it to a secure folder and wrote in my journal with a pen instead of pressing keys. Then I turned off the kitchen light and stood in the dark long enough for my eyes to adjust. The apartment settled around me with the small sounds of a place that has been lived in with care. When I finally moved, I walked to Noah's room and checked that the blanket covered his shoulder. He breathed deeply, the kind of sleep that does not know what battles parents fight to protect it. I closed his door until it almost latched and went back to the table. I listened to the recording one more time, not because I needed to, but because precision is how I stay upright. Then I sent it to the secure cloud Daniel had set up for evidence and wrote the final line for the day. My son is 12 and he understands the truth better than many adults. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 4. When my son took the stand. June arrived with sun that pretended to be summer and a wind that reminded you it was not. On the morning of the final hearing, I woke before the alarm and watched the early light crawl across the ceiling. Noah slept a few doors away, his sketchpad open on the nightstand like a small door to a safer world. I made coffee and held the warm mug long enough to feel steady. Then I packed the folder Daniel had labeled Evidence Originals, and we drove downtown with the windows cracked to let the air sharpen us. The courthouse smelled like paper and floor wax. Daniel met us near the elevators with a calm that made the corridor feel less like a tunnel. He knelt to Noah's height and spoke with kindness and precision. "You are not on trial," he said. "If the judge asks you questions, answer in your own words. If you need a moment, take it." Noah nodded and looked to me. I touched his shoulder. We rode up in silence, faces reflected in the elevator doors until they looked like someone else's. Inside the courtroom, the lights were bright and without mercy. Ryan sat at the petitioner's table with Samantha Green on his right. He wore the same dark suit from the first hearing and the same expression that said he had already calculated the verdict. Lorraine sat behind him, spine straight, purse clasped like a shield. Daniel and I took the respondent's table. I placed my folder to the left so my right hand would be free. My palms had stopped sweating years ago when I learned that panic is a luxury for people who do not have to protect anyone. The clerk called our case and the judge entered. She was exact and spare with silver hair and a face that did not telegraph conclusions. The nameplate read Helen Crawford. She looked at each of us, and something in her eyes made the room settle. She did not need to ask for order. She was the order. Ryan rose first. His voice had that middle weight he cultivated when he wanted to sound like principle, not control. "Your Honor, the child has been subjected to emotional volatility for years. He has expressed fear and disrupted sleep with the mother. We ask the court to place him in a stable environment with the father." He sat. Samantha's hands were folded. She did not look at me. The judge turned to Daniel. "Counsel," she said, "your submissions." Daniel stood with our stack. He had divided it with tabs so the story would unfold in the language the court trusts. He spoke clearly. Respondent submits the independent psychological evaluation of the minor conducted by Dr. Marianne Fields. She found no evidence of fear of the mother and reported that the child describes the mother as calm and attentive. He does report pressure to use specific statements about the mother when speaking to adults who make decisions. He placed the report on the evidence tray. The judge took it. Respondent also submits the forensic handwriting analysis of the notebook page petitioner offered at the prior hearing. The expert concludes the page was not written by the minor. He cites inconsistencies in letter formation, slant spacing, and the absence of the minor's known date boxing habit. He indicates substantial likelihood of adult authorship. He placed the report, then the exemplars of Noah's schoolwork, with the date boxes in the corner, small squares he had drawn, like a habit of order he did not know he had. Additionally, respondent submits a recording made by the child during a phone call with petitioner. Oregon is a one-party consent state. The child was a direct participant. The recording is accompanied by a declaration explaining the circumstances and a chain of custody affidavit. The audio captures petitioner instructing the child to use predetermined phrases at the hearing, including statements that the child is afraid of his mother. The judge accepted the thumb drive with a small nod. Finally, Daniel said, "Respondent submits an internal email obtained by a source and authenticated through metadata and witness identification. The email is from petitioner to associate counsel and directs a strategy to provoke respondent emotionally during court proceedings." At the words witness identification, Samantha's posture changed a fraction, as if a string at her shoulder had been cut. Ryan did not turn his head, but the line of his jaw sharpened. The judge glanced at each item, then looked up. Her voice was even. "All exhibits are admitted subject to wait. I will hear from the minor briefly. Counsel, you may remain seated. The court will question the child." A bailiff ushered Noah to the witness chair. He was small against the wood and leather a boy's body in a room designed for adult failures. He gripped the sides once, then let go. The judge softened her tone by half a step. Good morning, Noah. Do you understand that you are not in trouble and that you can tell me how things feel in your own words? Yes, he said. Do you feel safe with your mother? Yes, he said. She does not yell. She cries sometimes, but she goes to the other room and breathes and then makes tea. She talks to me only when she is calm. Do you feel safe with your father? Yes, he said after a pause. I feel safe. But he asks me to say words I do not feel. What words? The judge asked. That I am scared at night, he said. That mom yells a lot. It is not true. The judge's face did not change. She nodded once. Where would you prefer to live most of the time? With mom, he said. Because she does not say bad things about anyone. She lets me like people even when she does not. The sentence hung in the room like a bell. A scrape of a chair broke the hush. Ryan stood halfway and then seemed to remember where he was. He pressed his hands flat on the table. The judge thanked Noah and asked the bailiff to escort him back to the side room where he had waited earlier so he would not hear what came next. Before he left, he looked at me. I made my face open so he would see only green lights. When the door closed, the judge turned to Daniel. Play the recording, she said. Daniel connected the drive. The speakers filled with Ryan's voice telling our son to use short sentences and to call fear by name. It lasted a minute and a half. It felt longer. When it ended, the silence felt like a verdict. The judge shifted her attention to Ryan. Petitioner, she said, do you contest the authenticity of that recording? Ryan sat very still. It is a snippet without context, he said. I was guiding him to be precise. The judge waited as if there might be more. There was not. She turned to Samantha. Associate counsel, I will ask you a direct question. Did you receive internal communications from petitioner that described a strategy to elicit an emotional display from the respondent in court? Samantha's eyes moved to the email in Daniel's stack and then back to the judge. She lifted her chin, and when she spoke, her voice was soft, but it carried to the far wall. Yes, she said. Ryan turned to her with fury so naked it looked young. We do not answer, that he hissed. Attorney-client communications are privileged. The judge cut him off without raising her volume. Privilege does not protect misconduct, she said. Samantha swallowed and continued. I received messages encouraging that approach. I will provide a declaration if the court requires. Lorraine made a small sound behind us like a prayer dropping a syllable. Ryan tried to catch the thread of authority again. This is a custody case, Your Honor. We are losing sight of the child's need for structure. The judge looked at him for a long moment, not unkindly, but without purchase. Mr. Calloway, she said, you are an officer of the court. You told your son to use words that were not his. You submitted a page that my expert indicates he did not write. You attempted to engineer a presentation at this table. Do you know what we call that when we remove the cushions of euphemism? No one answered. The question did not ask for answers. It was a road built to a place he did not want to stand. She turned to Daniel. Anything further, she asked. No, he said. The record is complete. The judge sat back, hands folded, eyes on the far wall for a breath. When she spoke, the words were clean. The court is charged with the best interest of the child. The evidence before me shows that the minor is bonded to the mother, functions well in her care, and feels free to speak without pressure in her home. It also shows concerning behavior by the father, including attempts to influence the child's statements and to manipulate the presentation of evidence. Temporary orders are vacated. Physical custody and primary decision-making are awarded to the mother. The father shall have parenting time on a schedule to be determined in coordination with the court's Family Services Office, with a requirement that all contact with the child be free of litigation discussion. The court will refer this matter to the Oregon State Bar for review of the father's conduct. That process is independent of this court. She paused and looked at each of us as if locating our signatures on the day. Then she added one sentence that felt like the law making room for something more human. We do not draft children into our fights. The gavel did not slam. She simply stood and left. The clerk called the next case. The room resumed its hum like a machine that had paused for a single vital breath. I did not move for a moment. When I stood, my knees felt new, like I had been fitted with better parts. Daniel packed the exhibits and slipped the thumb drive into a small case. Breathe, he said with a smile that reached his eyes. You did exactly what you needed to. Lorraine walked by with her purse held differently now, less like a shield, more like something heavy. She stopped for a second, as if words had knocked at her door, and she was not sure whether to open. Then she put a hand to her throat and kept going. Samantha approached. Her face was pale but steady. "I will send the declaration to the court," she said quietly. "I am sorry for what this has cost your family." I nodded. "Thank you," I said. "He is a child. He deserved better from all of us." Ryan stood at the far end of the aisle, speaking to a man I did not know. His voice was a tight wire. He did not look at me. I realized I no longer cared if he did. In the hallway, the air felt warmer. The bailiff brought Noah to us. He walked with his hands in his pockets, and his bravery still visible in the set of his shoulders. I met him halfway, and he let me hug him in that new way he tolerates, arms loose but present. His voice was small in my ear. "Is it over?" he asked. "It is enough," I said. "We are going home." Daniel crouched again so he would not look down on a boy who had just told the truth in a room that often forgets what it sounds like. "You did well," he said. "You spoke like yourself." Noah looked up at him. "Do I have to talk again?" he asked. "Not today," Daniel said. "Today, you get to be a kid." We stepped out into June light that felt cleaner than when we had entered. On the steps, I turned to Daniel. "What happens with the bar review?" I asked. "They will examine the record," he said. "They decide if there is discipline. It is separate. You do not have to lift a finger." I nodded. He glanced at Noah's backpack. "Take the weekend," he said. "Make pasta. Tape that drawing to the wall." Noah tugged my sleeve. "Can we get ice cream?" he asked, "the kind with caramel swirls." "Yes," I said. "Caramel swirls." We walked to the car. The city sounded different, like a radio tuned to a station that remembered melody. On the drive home, Noah leaned his head against the window and watched the bridges pass. At a red light, he spoke without looking at me. "I said what I wanted," he said. "I know," I said. "That is what matters." Back at the duplex, he put his sketch pad on the table and drew the courtroom from memory. He drew the judge as a tall rectangle with light behind her. He drew the tables as two short rectangles and put a small circle near one of them that he labeled Mrs. Green. He drew his own chair too big and then erased it and drew it again. He handed me the page. "Does it look right?" he asked. "It looks like the truth," I said. He smiled and went to his room to change. I stood there with the drawing in my hands and felt something inside me unclench. On the counter, my phone buzzed. It was a short message from Daniel. "Order signed. Certified copy to follow. Family Services will contact you to schedule parenting time structure. Rest." I placed the phone face down. The kitchen window framed a square of blue sky no bigger than a hand. The apartment felt small and perfect. I set Noah's drawing beside the one of our kitchens so they could talk to each other. Then I checked the green dinosaur on the shelf, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to look at it in the light of the day that had just happened. It looked like any child's toy. It looked harmless. Sometimes evil hopes to pass as ordinary. Noah padded back in, wearing socks with tiny rockets. He opened the freezer and held the ice cream like a treasure. While I found bowls, he spoke softly. "Mom," he said, "you did not say anything bad about Dad in court." "I did not need to," I said. The truth made its own way. He thought about that for a moment, then nodded and dug his spoon into a hill of caramel. In the late afternoon, the sun warmed the living room to a gold that made everything kinder. Noah stretched on the rug with his book. I sat at the table and wrote a single line in the journal. He used the law to try to take my son. I used the truth to teach my son what the law can be. Daniel stopped by just before dinner to return the originals. He set the folder down and looked at Noah's drawing of the courtroom. "He got the bench almost to scale," Daniel said. "That is rare." Noah laughed. "It is easier when you can erase," he said. Daniel looked at me, the corners of his eyes easing. "Your boy taught us something today," he said. "There are rooms where adults forget why they are there." "He reminded us," I said. Daniel nodded. He put on his coat, then paused at the door. "Take tonight," he said. "Let quiet be enough." When the door closed, Noah leaned against me, taller than he had been in the morning. Outside, a breeze moved the maple leaves, and the evening came gently without argument. We ate pasta and taped the drawing to the wall. The apartment breathed with us. I let the stillness stretch without rushing to fill it. Somewhere beyond our street, the city kept its engines turning, but in our small rooms, the day was complete in the only way that matters. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 5. When the Truth Stayed. By the time spring came back around in Beaverton, the house had learned our names. 2 years is enough for floors to remember the sound of a boy's steps, and for a kitchen table to hold the shape of a life. On weekday afternoons, I pushed desks against the wall and unrolled a vinyl rug speckled with paint. A paper sign on the porch read, "Art for Healing," in letters Noah had traced with a ruler and patience. Some of my students came from homes that had split like ice on a river, and some were just visiting sadness for a season. They all learned the same rule. We name what we feel, and then we make something with our hands, so the feeling does not have to carry itself. Noah grew tall in small ways. His voice settled, his shoes found the limit of our budget faster than I could guess, and his drawings learned to breathe. He kept a milk crate by the window filled with pads and charcoal. Some nights he drew the same room from different angles until the page felt like a conversation. He laughed more, slept hard, and saved silence for the kind that heals. On a Saturday in late May, I was rinsing brushes while he drew a sliver of sun across the living room floor. The doorbell rang once, and I dried my hands on a towel before I opened it. Lorraine stood on the porch holding a small cardboard box against her coat, as if it might try to fly away. She was thinner, her hair pulled back without the old insistence, and the authority in her voice had softened at the edges. She looked past me into the room and then back at my face. "May I come in?" she said. I stepped aside. The box made a low sound as she set it on the table. She did not sit. She opened the lid and reached for the green dinosaur that had started a war I never asked for. It looked exactly the same and not at all a child's toy that did not know what it had carried. "I took the batteries out," she said. Her hands were careful. "I do not know why I kept it. I thought maybe I could make it ordinary again." I waited. The house waited with me. She set the toy down and folded the flaps of the box so they would not fall. "I have had 2 years to think," she said. "I was so sure that structure and rules would save a child. I forgot that truth is the first rule. I was proud, and that pride helped me lose a son. I do not want my silence to help me lose a grandson." The words landed plain and heavy. She was looking at the table, not at me. When she looked up, her eyes were not the same color I remembered. "I am sorry," she said, "for the names I called you in my head and sometimes with my mouth. For believing fear because it fit my story better than love did." I took a breath and set a brush on the towel. "We all learned something," I said. "The difference is that I learned with tears and he learned with law." She nodded. A small laugh escaped her, not because anything was funny, but because the sentence had the ring of something paid for. "Is he here?" she asked. "He is drawing," I said, and called into the living room. "Noah, come say hello?" He came to the doorway with charcoal on his thumb. His shoulders were broader than the last time she saw him in a courthouse hallway. He smiled a careful smile that did not promise more than it had. "Hi, Grandma," he said. She took a half step toward him and stopped. "I brought something of yours," she said, and lifted the dinosaur from the box. I wanted to give it back the right way, with its mouth closed. He took it, turned it once, then set it on the shelf with the other models. He stood with his hands in his pockets for a second, then looked at me. "Can I go back to my drawing?" he said. "You can," I said. He nodded to Lorraine and returned to the window. She watched him go like a person watching a ship leave harbor. "I do not know how to fix what I did," she said. I shook my head. "You are here," I said. "That fixes more than you think." She stayed for tea. We did not talk about Ryan much. There was not much to say. After the hearing, the Oregon State Bar reviewed his conduct and suspended his license for 6 months. He completed the ethics course the board required and petitioned for reinstatement. He now practices on a shorter leash and sees Noah according to the schedule family services set. The calls are quiet, the visits are ordinary, the rules hold. Before she left, Lorraine stood by the doorway and studied the box as though a map might appear if she stared long enough. She cleared her throat. "I would like to come again," she said. "If you will have me, I can bring shortbread." He used to like shortbread. "We will have you," I said. "Bring shortbread." She pressed her lips together and then smiled for real. When the door closed, the house exhaled. Noah came back to the table with his drawing board braced on his hip. "She is different," he said. "She is trying," I said. Trying is a kind of love. He nodded and set his board down. I am going to redo the light, he said. It should fall more on the floor and less on the wall. Do it, I said. Let the room be honest. June brought heat and berry stains and the small ecstasies of a garden that learned our habits. The basil kept pace with our dinners and the tomatoes made promises. My class filled with 6 regulars, then 8. We opened with breathing and then drew things with edges. Some parents came early and watched from the doorway, and I let them stay because it helps to see healing practiced out loud. On Fridays, we carried our work out into the yard and clipped it to a line so it could find the air. One afternoon, Noah laid a canvas on the table and said he wanted to try the courtroom again, not the way the room looked, but the way it felt when light came from a place you cannot see. He drew the bench as a line that rose and the windows as rectangles that warmed and softened at the same time. He painted 2 small figures at the respondents' table, one with a head tilted toward the other. He added a small circle near the petitioner's table and wrote Mrs. Green under it in pencil so lightly it almost did not exist. He saved the last space for the witness chair and then painted it empty. "Where am I?" he asked. "You are everywhere," I said. He smiled. "Maybe I will put a shadow." He mixed color until he found something near the shape of courage. In the finished piece, the light falls in from the left and lands on 2 places at once, the bench and the empty chair. The judge is not visible. The boy is not visible. The light is the only witness, and it tells the truth. We titled it "The Day Truth Spoke" because everything else sounded like translation. He photographed it with my phone, and we sent the file to a community show in Portland that calls for student work about justice. We did not talk about winning. We talked about frames. A week later, an email slid into the inbox with a subject line that made my hands go light. The Portland Youth Gallery wanted the piece for their summer exhibition. They asked for a short description and a date we could deliver it. Noah read the message twice and then sat very still. "Do I have to speak?" he asked. "You can speak," I said, "or your painting can. Either way is a sentence that stands." He looked at the canvas for a long time and then nodded. We stretched linen over a simple frame and asked Mr. Patel at the shop on Canyon Road to help us mount it. He charged less than he should have and wrapped the corners in paper that made a sound like clean pages. On the evening of the opening, the gallery smelled like wood and second chances. Students clustered near their work in clothes that had been ironed by someone who hoped for them. Daniel found us near a painting of a bridge and waved. He looked like rest in a suit that had known a long day and forgiven it. He shook Noah's hand. "You did something brave twice," he said. "Once in a room with microphones and once on a canvas?" Noah shrugged, but his mouth betrayed pride. Daniel turned to me as we stepped toward the painting. The small placard read, "The Day Truth Spoke." Underneath the description said, "A courtroom without faces and a light that knows who is telling the truth." Artist age 14. The words were simple and correct. If he had not spoken that day, Daniel said, "What would you have done?" "I would have kept going," I said. "I would have filed the motions and waited for the slow clock of law to do its work. I would have told the truth until the room learned it. It just would have taken longer to find us." He nodded. He stood in front of the canvas for a while like a person reading a monument and finally said, almost to himself, that it was the best testimony he had seen in years. People walked by and read the placard, and then looked at Noah with the particular curiosity reserved for young artists. He flushed and stared at his shoes and then lifted his head. He was learning that attention is a kind of weather. You do not control it, you dress for it. Lorraine arrived near the middle of the program carrying a small bag. Inside was a tin of shortbread and a folded note. She hugged Noah with permission and shook Daniel's hand as if she had always known him. Then she stood in front of the canvas and let herself be quiet long enough for gratitude to find her. "I am proud of you," she said to Noah, "for telling the truth and then making something beautiful out of it." He said thank you and then asked if he could eat a cookie because art shows cannot compete with butter. We stayed until the speeches ended and the room relaxed into laughter. When we stepped out into the evening, Portland felt like a city I had forgiven. We crossed to a diner for milkshakes and French fries and sat in a booth near the window. A couple nearby argued softly about a grocery list, and I wanted to hug them for winning at Ordinary. On the drive back to Beaverton, the bridges wore their own necklaces of light. Noah fell asleep before we hit the highway, and I drove like a person who had learned all the wrong lessons and then learned better. At home, I tucked him in and set the shortbread on the counter. I stood in the doorway of his room and listened to the small music a boy makes when he surrenders to sleep. Later, when the house had adjusted to night, I went through the old case folder one last time. The certified order lay on top, the bar notice beneath it, 6 months written in words that once felt like too little and now felt like enough. The rest of the pages were evidence of a life paused and then resumed. I slid the documents into a box and closed the lid. There is a difference between forgetting and choosing not to reopen. I chose the second. I walked to the window and looked out at a neighborhood that owned its own silence. Somewhere across town, a man I once loved was learning to practice law inside a fence. Somewhere closer, a woman was practicing how to ask for forgiveness and how to accept it. In our small house, a boy was keeping his promises to sleep and to wake. The next morning, my class arrived with backpacks and stories. We drew hands and ladders and bowls. We learned that sometimes healing looks like a straight line, and sometimes it looks like a circle that comes back to the doorway with better shoes. We washed brushes and left them in the rack to dry. At dismissal, one of the girls hugged me quick and ran to a car where her mother waited with a dog in the back seat. The dog wagged a tail that forgave everything. That night, Noah taped a print of his painting on the wall above the kitchen table beside the drawing of our kitchen. The two pictures looked at each other like old friends. He stepped back and considered the placement. "It is right," he said. "It is right," I said. I set water to boil and watched the steam trace old routes toward the ceiling. There was nothing to fix. The pot sang anyway. They called me a bad mother. They said I was unstable and soft and wrong. My son showed them what love looks like when it does not need a microphone. He stood in a room that forgets children, and he reminded it gently. He made light travel farther than it knew how. If you have ever had someone name you with a word that is smaller than your life, listen to the quiet voice that already knows who you are. Truth does not always arrive with applause. Sometimes it speaks in a room and then paints itself on a canvas. If this story met you somewhere you needed it, tell me what part stayed with you. Leave a thought, share a memory, or pass this along to someone who could use a light. We will keep the table set and the water warm,